We've done a couple of things. We've made menopause seem like it's this old woman issue, and it's not. If you're in your late 30s, you can start looking for some of these symptoms to possibly happen. It's pretty basic. It's hormone fluctuation. It's a roller coaster. It's chaos of your hormones. Maybe sex looks a little bit different during this time. Like, it's okay after 22 years that, you're exploring with something different.
Welcome back to the Rena Malik MD podcast, your source for evidence-based information about your sexual health and more. I'm Dr. Rena Malik, urologist and pelvic surgeon. Today, our guest is Tamsen Fadal. She is an Emmy award-winning journalist, a documentary filmmaker of the documentary The M Factor, and author of the new book, How to Menopause. Today, we had a wonderful conversation about what it is actually like to go through menopause as a working woman and how you can support women in the workplace and in relationships during this transition. We also talked about red flags in relationships and how to avoid staying in relationships that no longer serve you. Now, before I let you guys listen to this amazing conversation, I have one small ask. A lot of you listen to this podcast or watch this podcast on YouTube, but only a small percentage of you actually subscribe or follow the podcast. Now, if you are liking what you are hearing, please make sure to do me this solid favor and subscribe or follow the podcast so that you can get new episodes each and every week. We hope you enjoy.
Thanks so much for having me.
Tamsen has been really open about her personal experience with menopause and how she noticed her first symptoms really impacting her when she was at work.
It was November of 2019, actually, which it seems so long ago now, but I used to anchor the evening news. So I would do the news earlier in the day, and then I'd do the news from 10 to 11 o'clock. And I had been looking back, I'd been having some issues when I'd look at a word, I'd recognize a word, but I couldn't get the word out of my mouth. And I thought, well, it's stress, I'm tired, I didn't read my scripts enough. I had a bunch of different of those just excuses. That particular night, I'd had that at the beginning of the newscast. And then right around 10:30, halfway through the newscast, I was in a commercial break. And I felt this tremendous heat, from the core of my body up through my head and just kind of sweat break out everywhere. I really thought I was going to pass out, and my heart was kind of racing where you could hear your heartbeat in your ear almost. And I said kind of jokingly, in a studio full of men, if I fall over, somebody catch me. And the sports guy turned and looked and said, "Hey, are you okay? You don't look okay. So why don't we get you off the set?" And he really graciously led me off the set and brought me to the women's bathroom. And he didn't know what to do with me. He was like, "Do I come in? Are you okay? I don't know what to do." And I went in. He left the door open. I just really just dropped down to the floor, just try to calm my body down because I didn't know if I was going to be sick or pass out. And I got up about 20 minutes later, and I was fine, and went home. First time I didn't finish a newscast, which was weird for me. I knew. I decided the following week and weeks after that, go see what's going on. I went to the GP. I did a physical. I told my therapist about it. She said, maybe we'll give you some Lexapro. And then finally I ended up at the OBGYN, and I got my blood test back, and in my patient portal, I got a message in my portal that said, "In menopause, any questions?" And that's how I found out I was in menopause. I had no idea anything about perimenopause at the time. And that kind of that started me on a journey that I didn't know would ever lead me here.
Tamsen is clearly an accomplished and successful journalist with years of experience. And all of a sudden, she had this dramatic change that she couldn't make sense of. And this is not a unique experience. All women go through changes during perimenopause. And while not everyone is bothered by their symptoms, many do and just attribute it to aging and suffer in silence. I then asked her how people, spouses, friends, employers can better support women through this transition.
We say 1 billion women are going to be in menopause this year or are in menopause this year. And so many continue to come into this transition in life. And I just think that support in so many areas is important. Not just within our own home life, because you've got a sister or a wife or a mother or a friend or somebody going through it. So that's kind of in your personal relationships, but also in the workplace. I find that there's a reason really to support employees. So many women are at the height of their career. A lot of women are going to be in this transition for a long time. It doesn't start at 50 years old. And I think awareness of this overall across the board is going to be the most important thing we can do. And then we have to tackle it in some of these different areas. In the doctor's office, when it comes to workplaces, when it comes to home life, when it comes to partners, there's a lot of different places. And I think that support comes in a couple of different ways. One, in education, and two, in just not making fun of this transition, because I think that's what we've seen for a long time. We've seen mockery and we've seen shame in this transition. And there should be none of it. It should just be something we go through. The support is there. We get to the other side, and we know it's going to be great. We do. We have evidence of seeing women just really thriving post menopause. I'm encouraged by the fact that we'll get there as we continue to talk about it.
Clearly, from a financial perspective, it makes sense to support employees through this transition. We know it's inevitable, and while it might affect performance for some period of time, if we don't support women in the long run, we risk losing valuable employees who have dedicated years to their career and have skills that are not easily replaceable.
And I think the most important thing is when we look at the cost of inaction, because I know that, we've heard over time business leaders kind of scoff at the idea of another set of benefits, especially when it's something we're just really understanding and learning about. But there really is a cost of inaction with all this. And I think that that's important to note, because these are workers that you don't want to replace. These are valuable workers. And I think that menopausal workplace support centered around women's health is gotta be important. There's got to be the advocacy for it. And there's a couple of ways to do this, and some don't really cost very much. Some don't have to be so costly. I understand that it's a tight labor market. I understand that given the makeup of the workforce, that some people are like, well, what are we supposed to do? One, listen to them. I think that that's very easy to do. As an organizational leader, organizations want to retain talent and enhance performance and motivation across all these different age groups. So I think listening to employees, whether it's via surveys, whether it's, a different way that you do that, discussing menopause symptoms with a supervisor, making sure that there's somebody that they can do that with, that doesn't really cost. The cost is educating. And I think that is low hanging fruit in terms of, what we can do. Figuring out, if you are an employee going to an employer, how you think that any of these symptoms could affect your ability. And then if there's anything that could be done to make it a little bit easier in the workplace. I was in Davos earlier this year, and we talked to a large company that has factories all around the world. They changed their uniforms, and it made a huge difference for women. They installed fans in different areas. It was very little cost to them, a very huge benefit to the women. So, I know we have all different kind of workplaces that we're talking about, but that's not a lot when it comes to be able to retain that talent. I'd also love to see, and I think this is going to take some time, but to build some kind of benefits and have some kind of benefits in place for these women so they have places to go through. There are a number of organizations and companies that help deliver menopause support in the workplace through apps, one-on-one counseling, different kind of services. But that is one part of the puzzle to help with. And I'm encouraged that we're seeing more and more of those companies come forward to make it easier for organizations. And then I think when you talk about awareness within the organization, you want women to know that they can take advantage of these benefits so they know that they actually exist.
In Tamsen's book, she talks about the impact of perimenopause on her relationship. At times, she felt like she was living with her roommate rather than her husband. And many women who are in partnered relationships actually notice that their sexual desire starts to decline. And this obviously is devastating to their partner and can be really challenging to bring up without inadvertently being perceived as being insensitive. So I asked Tamsen what tips she had about communicating about these changes in intimacy and sex during this time.
No woman wants to hear, like, is it your hormones again? Like, what's going on? Are you hormonal? No woman wants to hear that. But, I think that there are a lot of ways to have these kind of conversations. I'm hopeful the more that we get this information out, the easier it's going to be for women and for men and for partners to have this kind of conversation, because this is this normal transition we go through. We've made it so abnormal to talk about, which is, I think, we've done it such a disservice. So I know that we're going to get there into this next place. But when it comes to having those conversations, being able to be a little bit open about it and say, if you're a partner and you're noticing your partner going through this, like, hey, some of these might be symptoms of this transition that's really a normal transition that can start in your 40s. We've done a couple of things. We've made menopause seem like it's this old woman issue, and it's not. If you're in your late 30s, you can start looking for some of these symptoms to possibly happen. It's pretty basic. It's hormone fluctuation. It's a roller coaster. It's chaos of your hormones. That doesn't mean that you're aged and you're old and you're forgotten and you're invisible. And unfortunately, we've attributed a lot to that, which is why I think we get offended by, is it your hormones? So that's one, is to be able to have that conversation a little openly. And I don't know many women now, and certainly not the ones that I've talked to, that would be anything but grateful for their partners to be able to have this conversation with them in a way that makes them feel supported and helped. I've noticed that more than anything else, having a partner that understands what they're going through so they don't feel like they have to hide and they don't feel like they're insulting their partner if they don't want to have sex or don't feel like having sex or don't want to be touched or cuddly. There's a reason for it. There's actually a scientific, real reason of things that are going on in our body. So I think, being aware of that and then also understanding as the person going through menopause, some of the solutions available. I mean, that it's not something wrong with you in particular, and there are a lot of actual solutions that your partner can be a part of.
Are you sick of going to the doctor only to have them talk at you for 15 minutes and leave without knowing exactly why they're prescribing you this certain medication and what exactly the next step is to take to optimize your health? Wouldn't it be great to finally find a doctor who actually listens to you, answers your questions, and doesn't rush you out the door? Well, at my practice, Rena Malik MD, I aim to do just that. I specialize in taking care of patients who have issues with their sex lives, issues with their bladder, with their hormone health, or are having pain in their pelvic region or with sex. My goal is to give you the time and attention you deserve so you can leave with a clear understanding of your condition as well as our treatment plan that's optimized for your goals. During your visit, I'm 100% present with you for an entire hour. And after you leave, you can reach me. It is super easy to send me a message through our secure portal, and I'll get back to you within 24 to 48 hours. No questions asked, no hidden fees. Scheduling is easy. Just visit our website, renamalikmd.com/appointments. We see patients in both Irvine and Beverly Hills, California, and I see patients virtually in California, Florida, Illinois, Maryland, New York, New Jersey, and Virginia. Oh, and don't forget Texas. If you're outside these states, consider seeing me for an educational visit. I look forward to seeing you. Tamsen herself started a new relationship around the time of perimenopause, and she shares her experience.
I was actually with my then boyfriend, now husband, Ira, when I was in the airport and I got that message in my patient portal that said in menopause, any questions? And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in menopause. And I remember thinking to myself, like, oh, what does this mean to us? And so, it was a time it changed some things, it really did change some things. From one year to the next, like when we met, I totally, was so sexual and like, we were meeting up in all these different places. It was so fun. And then I don't know, a few years later, I'm like, don't come near me. So I was 50 when I got remarried and I was on my honeymoon and I'm like, oh, I'm not really feeling like having sex, but it was really about open communication. And honestly, I don't know in my 30s that I could ever have the conversations I had in my late 40s, 50s with a partner. I think I would have felt a lot of shame wrapped around it. I think I would have felt like it made me less than. I didn't understand how much intimacy is actually built on communication. I mean, intimacy is not just what happens in the bedroom in the throes of sex. It's not just about that sex act. It's about the communication that has to take place. And quite frankly, I think it makes that intimacy so much stronger. And I have had so many men come up to me and say, how can I support my partner or my wife? That makes me so excited. Like, come up and proactively want to do that. So I know there are men out there that want to help. I know there are men out there that are encouraged by hearing this information. So they feel like they're not operating in the dark.
During the menopausal transition, not only does your libido sometimes take a nosedive, but there's also changes to the vulvar tissues themselves. Something called genitourinary syndrome of menopause is a condition that affects up to 80% of women and occurs even after menopause is finished. And this could include symptoms like vaginal dryness, loss of lubrication, thinning of the vaginal epithelium or tissues. And this is all because of lack of estrogen, which can oftentimes lead to pain with sex for a lot of women. And some of these women actually avoid sex because of pain. And they might even be embarrassed to bring it up to their partners of many, many years that all of a sudden something's hurting that didn't used to hurt before. And as someone on the other side of that, if you're the male partner, it can be great to ask your partner, hey, is anything hurting? Is something bothering you? Do you want to try something different, like maybe adding lubrication? Or do you want to see a doctor? I can come with you.
If a man doesn't know what is happening and they don't know that their partner's in pain or why they're actually in pain, Education is important for all of us. As women, I didn't know I was in pain. I didn't understand that. So how would my husband understand that? And then also understanding that there are very cost-effective ways to deal with this, very, safe topical estrogen products that you can apply to your vulva that come in different forms that can make it very, very, easy and that are safe. And that there are options out there for women, depending on what they want to do. There are solutions. And I think that that's why I say we have so many different areas to tackle, right? We have to let the women know. We have to let partners know. We recently did a documentary, and we had a lot of partners start to show up at the screening. So originally it was all women, like it was the whole room was just women, and then there'd be like one guy that got dragged to the documentary screening. And now we're seeing like there was a group of men that held a screening. So I do feel encouraged by the fact that they just need to know what's going on, and they just need to understand that it's not them. Look, in some cases, it might just not be the right relationship at the right time anymore. But I did do a section in the book called "Is It Your Husband or Your Hormones?" Because I really do think that we have a lot of question during this time, and we doubt what's going on with ourselves, and we feel a lot of shame. So I can't say enough about communication. I can't say enough about exploring options, and then also being aware that maybe sex looks a little bit different during this time. Like it's okay after 22 years that, you're exploring with something different. And it's okay to relearn something that, you might want differently when it comes to pleasure.
Unfortunately, many times women going through menopause just don't feel sexy or desirable like they used to. And a lot of it is because of stigma, right? People who have hot flashes, that's something old women go through. And so when you start feeling like you're older and maybe you're gaining more weight in your midsection and you don't look like you used to, this can lead to a lot of insecurity around body image and ultimately lead to avoidance of sex. The one thing I recommend partners to do is make sure that your partner feels desired. And sometimes in a long term relationship, it can be easy to just forget that these are things that you should probably remind each other of because, hey, you've been together for 10, 20 years and you love your partner, and they obviously should know that. Sometimes a little verbal reminder can go a long way. Something as simple as, "You look so beautiful today," or "I love this about you," can just make someone feel really special. Tamsen also brought up some really interesting statistics in the book. She mentioned that a third of divorces happen over the age of 55, and that 8 out of 10 women feel like their menopausal symptoms put a strain on their relationships. Unfortunately, the reality is that these hormonal changes that occur can sometimes lead to dramatic personality shifts that can sometimes make home situations untenable.
I think we don't have the studies as up to date right now in the US, but I know the UK did a number of different studies, spearheading one asking women about the effect of menopause on their relationships. AARP did one, but it was about 20 years ago, but did find that women in that age of 40s, 50s to 60s, two-thirds initiated by women during that time. And look, we don't know. Maybe those marriages had to end for other reasons, but it could also be that women did not know exactly what was going on with them. When we look at this, we look at hormonal changes having effects on our mood, having effects on mental clarity that we talked about early on emotions and our overall well-being. So it is a rocky transition, and especially if you don't know what's happening. If you really go into this not knowing what's happening, and it's why we hear that phrase over and over again, I don't feel like myself. I don't recognize myself. I don't know who I am anymore. All these women are not just saying that in unison. Like that is exactly what is happening. We don't feel like ourselves anymore. And so it really does stand to reason that that is going to have an impact on so many different areas of our lives.
I asked Tamsen what are some tips that she has for male partners, fathers, brothers, things that men in women's lives can do to help support them.
I think first of all is listening, understanding, and educating. I put together a guide, the Men's Guide to Menopause, just because when I put the book out, I had put so much into the book. I was like, but you know what? We still need something for men. And so I did put that together on my website just because I wanted men to have a little bit of help in there, but this book is, was necessary to get to really address what's going on with women. But I think first and foremost, be educated about what's going on. I just break down the basic. What's menopause? What's perimenopause? What are the symptoms? What are the most prevalent symptoms we're talking about? And how to address it in a way where it's not like, oh, is it your hormones? There's certain ways to bring things up and address things that I think are the right way, and that can be conversation openers versus closers. And I think that that's important. I also think it's important to just have that awareness. And in the workplace, whether it's female employees, whether it's somebody that's working for you, whether it's a coworker, just be aware of those symptoms, because remember, and you know this better than anybody, is some of those symptoms can be indications of something more serious. And so I just always think it's so important. Like, if you just care about somebody, you do that. If you saw somebody just not looking right or acting, different, I think just being aware of those things is good practice.
Quick break from this episode to let you know I am so grateful that you're spending part of your day with me. I started creating content online to empower people to learn more about their bodies without needing to go see a doctor, pay a copay, wait in a waiting room, or find parking. And it has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. If you want to help support our mission of providing free education, please consider joining our premium membership. There you will have access to ad-free episodes, which are released early, as well as free transcripts and the opportunity to ask me anything. And these questions are answered in our monthly AMA episodes. Support the show and join today at renamalik.supercast.com. Can't wait to see you there. Unfortunately, the timing of the menopause transition is at the worst time. It's usually a time of heightened stress. Usually your children are getting older. They need your attention in different ways. Maybe your parents are aging. And typically, if you're in a long-term relationship, you've been together for some period of time, and things are not usually as novel and as exciting as they used to be. And work tends to be ramping up. So likely in a career, you're going to be getting bigger projects or take on larger tasks, which require more attention and ultimately lead to more stress. So I often say, if there's anything you can do, the best thing to do is try to reduce your partner's stress. That might be hiring support, that might be taking some of the things off her plate, or really just helping her get organized in her life and deciding what things really matter and what she can let go.
It doesn't have to be complicated. It can be very, very simple. It's just, I think what I've learned out of all of this is the definition of community for me has shifted. Community is not just like my three best friends. It's people that can help support me in some of these areas to just alleviate that heaviness, right? And I think that what you're talking about is exactly it. All of that community, having that community for women can make all the difference in the world. So we're not saying to women, go meditate and release your stress. Well, that's not going to work if you have to come back and do 7 loads of laundry, take kids somewhere, deal with elderly parents. So I just think that understanding that part and seeing where you can pitch in it makes a bigger difference than I think it ever has.
I pointed out that oftentimes male partners feel like protectors and they want to protect their partners. And a great way to look at this is looking at as a part of your protecting duty. You're not only protecting them from the outside world, but you're also protecting them from what's going on inside them. We then went on to discuss Tamsen's history as a matchmaker and what she's seeing people do wrong when they're trying to make a connection with the opposite sex.
I had a part of a business with my former husband, and it was a matchmaking business and a dating business, and it was based out of New York City. Anyway, it was really before a time when you had all of the apps and everything going on, so it was much more hands-on and much more in person. But I think that one of the biggest things that I looked at after we had that business, it was years ago now, but I think the one thing I saw was this immense pressure that we have with timelines. I think that was a big part of it. I'm hopeful that we've let up on ourselves a little bit as women, but I don't necessarily know that we have. But timelines were huge, and it was just like, I don't need to find the perfect person. I need to find a person because this is where I am in my life. So those were a lot of the big mistakes, because I think that, look, I'm aware biologically of different timelines that take place, but I just think that sometimes we set ourselves up for so much stress in that. That was a huge mistake I saw women make very, very often, just because they felt this pressure from society. I hope that's calmed down just a little bit. I would say some of the other areas that I would hope have changed just a little bit is, how we define ourselves as women, and what's important when we're looking at a relationship. What I was looking at when I was 25 and 30 is certainly not what I'm looking at today, and my husband today is certainly not what I would have picked in my 30s. I was just looking for fun and having a good time, and now I realize that that kind of protector thing is really what I wanted for myself personally. So those are some of the areas I think that I have seen over time. I mean, there's many that go on and on. I would say not fighting to stay in a relationship that's not serving you. If you feel like you're doing all the work and you think you're going to change somebody, that is never, ever, ever going to happen. I would say if you're changing yourself in some way to make sure that you fit somebody else's standards, that is going to be an exhausting part of life. That's never going to be something that you're going to want. And I would also caution women when it comes to life. I don't think you have to choose. I don't think you have to pick somebody over a career or pick somebody over this or that. I think if you get into that pleasing thing that I do see a lot of us in, oftentimes that doesn't really end well in the end.
I also asked her in particular what mistakes she saw on the male side of the equation.
Men are very interesting. Like in New York City, there are 100,000 more single women than men. So men really had the kind of like pick and led the way in a lot of those different areas. I think for men, I think that understanding women, we're so different than men in so many different ways. So I think really understanding where a woman's coming from is super important. I look at the patients my husband has now with me, and I think like, could he have had that when he was 30 years old? I'm not really sure if he could or couldn't. I think understanding what women are going through for men is really essential. I think that a lot of men, are moving through in career is front and center with a lot of what's going on in their lives. And they look up all of a sudden, they're like, oh, wait a minute, there's more things I want to pay attention to. I think it's okay to have that balance. And I don't know that we allow men that grace to be able to do that, but they should. I have a 13-year-old nephew now, so I'm always like, okay, what do I need to teach him? So he goes into this, dating and love and relationship world the right way and doesn't feel, some kind of stress because, men have the same stresses like that. They're not immune to this. They're not immune to like questioning how the other partner feels or feeling stressed out about a relationship or wondering if they're doing things right. Sometimes, they might not vocalize it the way we do, but I think that they're not immune to those stresses.
I pointed out that men have their own difficulties, and unfortunately, unlike women, they tend not to talk about it and they don't build the community as well as women do. And then I shared my biggest takeaway from my relationship and seeing other successful relationships is that mutual respect is probably the core of every successful relationship. When that respect deteriorates early on, it might seem like these small, little, insignificant jabs, but that's the person's way of telling you that they don't respect you. And in that case, the relationship is never going to last.
100%. I mean, I think, we get into place now. It's oftentimes very difficult to be present with all the things that we have going on in the world. And I think that we've got to pay attention to those. The respect part of it is a very big deal of being present, of respecting boundaries and being aware of it, assuming that the other, not communicating properly. I think that that's a big mistake. And I think that sometimes we get afraid to do that because we don't think somebody else could handle it. But I think we can handle it. I think what we can't handle is unknown. I think unknown is just not where you want to be for either sex.
I then asked Tamsen what's next for her. She just wrote this wonderful book. She's published this great documentary. What's next?
I actually am working on a podcast, which is going to be revealed this coming week. So I'm excited about that. I think that with all of this, I've realized my through line has been being a journalist. I didn't realize when I walked away from news how much I would still be doing journalism and all of this. And I really do love talking to people. I love sharing information. I like sharing people's stories and then elevating people who have expertise. And I think that that's what I'm excited about. It's important to me though, to keep pushing forward on all these fronts and making sure we're making change in the right places, making sure that the documentary and the book and the party are not all individual things, so they all move forward this message so we can make changes when it comes to medical schools, so we can make changes when it comes to research and healthcare, so we can make changes in workplaces. Those are the three big areas for me that I think are super important and that I'm going to continue to work toward until we see that change happen.
We then ended with our final 4 questions. What is something you know now in life that you wish you knew earlier?
Oh gosh, that things are going to work out the way they're supposed to. Like I used to fret to make everything perfect. And now I realize that I don't have to do that. And I'm still learning that lesson every single day. But I wish I had known that when I was younger. I would have saved a lot of time.
What's a non-negotiable, something you have to do every single day?
Every single day I have to get outside. I don't care what city I'm in, and I don't care how cold or rainy or awful it is. I have to get outside. I never had that before. I used to work in a news studio with no windows, so I never had that before. And in the last year and a half, or maybe 2 years now, it is essential. Like I can feel my body pulling me outside. I think that's a non-negotiable for me for sure. And then also taking like a little bit of time each day to connect with my dad or my brother or my sister-in-law, like a loved one. I need that connection now. I think I wasn't present all the time, and so I think in some ways I want to make sure that I am.
What is a life hack or health hack you would share?
I think my health hack. I don't know. I do a few of the different hacks. I guess more for sleep, and that I try to like make sure that that's all good. Like bed at the same time every night, every night, every night. And so I think I've kind of like fixed my, everyone calls it like a sleep hygiene. I think I fixed that and made that a little bit more clear for myself. And so I've kind of hacked my way into not sleeping because that was such a problem for a long time that I'm feeling really good about where I am.
And if you couldn't be a journalist, author, entrepreneur, podcaster, what would you do?
I think I would probably want to be on Broadway because every time I go to a Broadway show, I like burst into tears at the end because of the energy of human performance. I just always think that that's like the coolest thing. It's my passion in life is to like go to shows, live shows, theater, Broadway, sing. I just love it all. So that's what I would do. Though I don't know that my voice will ever hold up for that. So I think I got to stick where I am.
Thank you guys so much for joining me. If you guys like this content, make sure to follow me at Rena Malik MD on all social media platforms. And as always, remember to take care of yourself because you're worth it. If you enjoyed this clip from the Rena Malik MD podcast, make sure to check out the full video right here. If you enjoyed that clip with guest Tamsen Fadal, make sure to check out the full episode on the Rena Malik MD podcast.